Let's take a look at some information charts on REN for Brave New Coin. So REN is one of the original bridging DeFi dApps before bridging was a thing. Maybe they created bridging. Maybe Atomic Swaps created bridging. But in any case, they call themselves Open Protocol, providing access to inter-blockchain liquidity for all decentralized applications. How this works is you send whichever coin can be handled through the REN VM to the REN VM. It spits out the REN version through the use of dark nodes and dark pools, meaning it's semi-anonymous or anonymous, depending on if the chain analysis companies are cracking that code yet, which I'm sure they are. But that allows you to then bridge it elsewhere or bridge something to any chain. It's available on a ton of dexes, several different chains. And if we look at the numbers under the hood, they report 1.5 billion TVL. Most of that is going to be BTC. It generally is BTC for REN. Also some Luna, some Doge, which has been here since I've ever started looking at REN, which is a bit unusual. Filecoin and Zcash also up there, no idea why. And you can see the fees for minting and burning. And these fees are what pay the pool, the dark nodes, the service providers basically, to get the job done. And it requires 100,000 REN to be a dark node, which acts as a master node effectively. Semi-staking service provider type situation. From a regulatory perspective, I don't know what they're considered. I don't think this is going to pass any legal regulations, at least in the US. Not saying it should be illegal, should be legal. I'm just saying based on the current rules, I'm not a lawyer, my understanding of it all. This allows for non-KYC AML activity, which in the eyes of the US law is probably not a good thing. But in the now, enjoy all you can if you're in the United States anyway. And you can see they're available on ETH, BSC, Phantom, Polygon, Avalanche, Solana, Arbitrum. And we can go through and look at the TVL of all these chains individually. My guess is Solana's up there, ETH, Arbitrum. And this is going to shift based on fees of the chain. I believe the minting and burning fees are the same across the board. I don't think these have changed ever, at least in the time being. And each of these chains is going to have slightly different profiles for what is being exchanged through the VM. But for the most part, BTC is always going to be at the top there. And much like Dash, we can follow the dark nodes loosely as far as how many there are, if they're rising or falling. I don't have a graph for that. But what you want to see if we're bullish is a bunch of REN being soaked up in these nodes and removed from the market, basically. And you can calculate the pay periods essentially of network fees based on the minting and burning. And you can go super deep with this stuff. You can calculate how much 100,000 REN is. REN is what? It's around $1. So it's around $100,000 for a node. And then you can calculate ROI from there on how long it's going to take to get that money back. Obviously, if REN is depreciating in value of the token, then you have to make up more for it in the service fees. If REN is appreciating, your ROI is quicker. There's obviously, again, there's lots of game theory here. If there's a lot of REN activity, you're going to see fees go up in general. And there has been more activity with REN VM lately, at least maybe a month or two ago. All of a sudden, everybody started talking about REN, and all the VC people started talking about REN, and the price went up. And then they disappeared, and now the price is falling again. So always be careful who you're listening to and who you're following and what their conflicts are. But should you want to dig deep on something like REN master nodes, it can certainly be done, right? I'd personally, if I was doing it, I would wait until the nodes themselves were the cheapest, obviously, and then worry about fees after the fact. Because once you get that cheap node and you're at a relative bottom to price, you're more likely to get your ROI back quicker. And then once you get your ROI, you can pull out your ROI and then just let it free ride, right? Let the node just collect passive interest or whatever in perpetuity. If we look at DeFi Llama TVL, number 33 across the board, if we compare all the chains on everything in the universe, right? I love DeFi Llama. They have every chain I've never heard of even on here, but they're not going to win any TVL awards as far as the top contenders for lending and borrowing or anything like that, but they're certainly up there, and they're multi-chain. They're going more and more multi-chain. And again, it'll be interesting when regulations come down for this stuff, because this is one of the lowest hanging fruit to be hit with a regulation. And I know that because the alternative, the competitor, Wrapped BTC, requires KYC AML. TVL all-time at an all-time high for REN across the board through all chains. So REN's doing quite well from a TVL perspective, and the TVL influences service fees for the nodes as well, minting and burning fees, that sort of thing. Here's just the differential between REN BTC in the bottom and wrapped BTC in the top. I believe Alameda FTX SAM is the biggest issuer of wrapped BTC. And again, that requires KYC AML. REN BTC does not. If we take off wrapped BTC here, REN BTC had grown pretty substantially. And this matches the price chart quite well. So if you're watching this as a leading or lagging indicator, hopefully leading, certainly something to pay attention to. If they're minting something that looks to have a pretty decent correlation with price in general, that's the REN BTC price. But anyway, it correlates pretty well with the token price. If we look at on-chain stats for REN, the transaction counts are basically at an all-time low here. I guess not an all-time low if we zoom way out, but they're at multi-year lows. They don't look great. None of DeFi looks great right now on-chain. So I don't think this is as bearish as it looks, perhaps. Transaction values essentially close to all-time highs in October or at all-time highs because of ETH fees just being astronomical. Certainly a part of that. That's going to affect all tokens that are on Ethereum. Active addresses also multi-month, multi-year lows. Active addresses that haven't been this low since August, and then before that, since June 2020. So it's not like the I forget what changed here, if it was when they finally started issuing something, I can't remember, but basically the chain didn't actually do its thing that it was intended to do until 2020. I think that's when REN BTC actually started, but in any event, active address is quite low. NVT rising. NVT is an inverse metric of economic utility relative to price. You don't want to see this rising. You want to see it falling if you're bullish. But again, I don't think this is as bearish as it looks, considering for most of DeFi, everything doesn't look great on chain. You don't need to move this stuff on chain. The other part of this is I don't think Coinmetrics looks at multi-chain stuff currently. They only look at Ethereum metrics right now. And if fees are high on ETH, you're going to see less token transactions on ETH. And that's going to look more bearish than it actually is when you're looking at the on-chain stats. So a lot of little mini caveats here with the data that you're looking at, knowing where you're pulling it from. If you look at MVRV relative to price, similar to NVT, MVRV is a measure of market cap versus realized cap. For most coins, they top out at a 2x multiple. For most of DeFi, MVRVs are relatively meaningless. Here you got a high in MVRV at 1.7, and price skyrocketed way beyond that. Most recently, though, these have started to line up. So this gives me hope that MVRV actually will work for DeFi eventually, maybe in a year or two when we have enough data to say, okay, this is a high in price, this is a high in MVRV. These line up almost 1-to-1. So going forward, if REN flips crazy bullish, for example, I would look to MVRV and see, is it above 1.5? Is it above 1.8? Is it above 2? The higher the MVRV goes, the more and more likely the top is closer and closer and closer, because a rapidly rising MVRV represents increasing speculation relative to market cap, and eventually that topples over. So you always got to be careful with that. If we look at REN USD on the MA multiplier, this is the 365 MA on the bottom, 5x multiplier on the top. And even though this doesn't fit perfectly on backtesting, it does give you the highs here. Twice previously, it does give you the lows. Ideally, like Link, you see this ping-ponging over multiple years. Link's probably one of the better examples of MA multiplier, but Link USD. Currently, we're closer to the multiplier the 365 MA than the multiplier. Multiplier is painting a 350 target. So again, let's say you game theory out these master nodes, right? Let's say you buy 100,000 REN, lock it up, and this thing hits 350, and then you get paid on top of that. I'm not trying to be a masternode salesman for REN. I don't hold any REN, but that's a pretty good deal. You're making a 3.5x from here plus all of the fees. If any REN dark node people are watching this video, or you know somebody who has a REN dark node and is willing to comment about how that works in the comments of this video, I'd be highly curious. But anyway, so this looks closer to the buy than the sell. Certainly also doesn't look super great on backtesting as far as sort of being in the middle of a range at the moment. It certainly has picked out the highs and lows decently well. On the MAs, it looks tired You had your bull cross here in August. Price went up quite a bit, very near all-time high retest levels, but then just has curled back down since then. At this point, just like on the cloud, which is what I'm about to show, I would wait for a crisscross probably on the MAs here. This looks like it just needs some time. RSI also looks pretty tired there. Not a ton of support until 42 cents. Tons of support at 30 cents, 35, 36. So even in a bear market, it's probably going to find some support down there. But right now it looks ready to keep rolling over. And if we just pop on some sort of chart pattern thing with the cloud, with RSI, similar to the square chart I showed today in Legacy on that video, you don't want to see a declining RSI trend in a bull market. This needs to break this trend in order for me to be confident that it actually has a shot at bullish continuation. Both times in 2021, RSI topped out extremely fast, and then everything else after that was just a continuous bear div. So this needs to resolve. This needs to either test 80 cents, which is the edge to edge move here. This needs to puke out the bottom. This needs something, but much like the EMAs, you want this to crisscross on the TK lines because this will flip bearish here. So let this go neutral to bear. Wait for that TK recross with price above cloud. And ideally, that happens near the same time as this crisscross or 200 retest at the very least. But right now it just looks neutral to bearish. Against BTC, it's very unexciting, very range bound, very ugly, volatile, death cross coming. Doesn't look like anything I want to touch. I guess this is sort of like the support no man's land of bounce or die territory at 1000 sats here. Most of the volume historically has been at 500 sats, but this definitely isn't a chart I'd want to be trading by choice. It just looks too range bound to me. And REN ETH also looks ugly, bearish, doesn't look bad enough to buy, doesn't have that multi-week bull div yet. It's at or near multi-year lows, but this doesn't look great, you know. Ideally, this has a W double bottom and then something, I don't know, but that's months and months away. Right now, this thing looks like it wants to retest the current local low against ETH, but this is a hyper aggressive down move that REN historically has had quite frequently. I mean, look at this aggressive move from 60K whatevers to 20K whatevers. I say whatevers, it's like guai or whatever. I don't know the trading term. We haven't decided on that yet. We as the community. So it's no stranger to these just crazy aggressive downtrends, and I wouldn't want to step in front of that. Lastly, let me just mention the ETHBTC fund and DeFi portfolio I trade for Techme Capital and Enzyme Finance, a non-custodial portfolio management tool where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see everything, including AUM performance allocation, all the vaults I'm in here on Yearn, Comp, and Aave, as well as the trades in the trades tab down below. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.